Hello, guys and gals, me Mudahar, and there was a bit of a bomb drop last night. Don't want to undersell things that are going on. Nuclear grade cyber attack. The only saving grace here is the nukes weren't hit, okay? From what I understand, they're thankfully disconnected from the internet. But for anybody that needs to know, the internet is basically the place where we all connect to each other using a various set of applications, services, and whatnot. The people that are making those services usually depend on something that's made by some other person, that's made by some other person, and maintained by one random person. And ultimately, all of the internet dependency hell we sit upon is basically ripe to be compromised. And that's kind of what happened last night, ladies and gentlemen. So this is something that's known as NPM. I want you guys to think of it kind of like a app store for code. Basically, a lot of people that have already designed cool things and tools for websites kind of place them up here so that people who are designing new websites can just go over here and download tools and basically implement them in their website, okay? Now, this basically saves you time on writing the code yourself, but you do have to trust the developers behind it. Now, this is something known as Axios. Now, Axios is a little project, and if you open up their good old GitHub, it'll tell you exactly what this thing is for. Now, Axios' job over here and the features it provides you are things like browser requests, Node.js requests, a lot of things that, are basically a required dependency for most internet-related things. And you can see that it's downloaded 101 million times a week. In fact, if we refresh this page, I don't know if the count's entirely going to be real time, but a lot of people get their hands on this shit. Now, this was fucking hacked last night, okay? Massive bomb went off. So let's kind of talk, right? This is a guy called Jason Sayman, and he's the person that's maintaining this Axios. Like I said, a lot of people are thankless maintainers of the most important components on the internet. Now, this person ended up getting their credentials completely grabbed. Now, whether it was some old credential that was stolen, think of it like a YouTube channel hack, right? Somebody opens a shady malware, somebody opens something really shady on their computer, it steals a Google or YouTube token, carries it over to the attacker then uses this internet token to pose as you and make serious changes to your YouTube account. Except here, a massive change happened to this person's maintained account for this actual package. So literally last night, a specific version, Axios 1.14.1 and 0.30.4 were basically published to the registry. Now, for something that's downloaded 100 million times a week, you can imagine for the 2 hours that this shit was sitting up there, a bunch of teams, random people, vibe coders probably grabbed this shit and put it into their actual front-facing, services. Now, you might be like, Muda, do I have to worry as somebody that's just scratching my balls and playing games in my house? No. You probably weren't fucking around with NPM or using Axios to begin with. But there might be services that you use that actually do implement this into their system, and for those people, unless they manage to clean up everything by now, a lot of the hackers that use the supply chain attack have pilfered through their network and grabbed information that may be important to you, and only time will tell. Remember, it's been less than a day this has happened, okay? I've been up all night doing, gamer subs directly into the bloodstreams, code SOG, by the way, before we could continue this, okay? So, a lot's happening. But anyways, to give you an idea, basically when Jason's account was compromised, and even Jason had a fair bit to say too, he was wondering and trying to get support to understand how that even happened. He asked things like two-factor authentication on practically every single thing he interacts with. So it is definitely concerning, right? The people that targeted this guy used his credentials specially so that they could then implement and update and upload, malcrafted packages that people would unknowingly download. Remember, if a person like this's credentials is used, it bypasses the whole trust model, and people just stand, hey, Jason said it was okay, so fuck it, download it. But people didn't know at the time that Jason was hacked. Hell, Jason himself didn't even know that he was actually hacked at that moment. So when those malicious versions were updated, they basically added a new dependency called plain crypto.js at 4.2.1. And that was never imported basically anywhere else in the source code for this actual project. So when you combined all of these things together, what had ended up happening was, people who downloaded these packages were actually compromised. So what happened after they were compromised? Well, it didn't matter what operating system you had or you were running this shit under, whether you had Windows, Mac, or Linux, the guys behind this actually came up with some pretty clever techniques to specifically target each different version, right? And just to quickly, sum it up here, Windows actually had a few PowerShell scripts that allowed it to actually survive reboots, meaning that even if you restarted your computer, what would effectively happen was after a computer would restart, the system would fire up its PowerShell scripts and immediately connect to a command and control server. And similar things would happen to Linux users as well, and obviously to the Mac people. And for a lot of people who were installing this kind of stuff too, remember, because this plain crypto.js was made specifically for this attack, it was masquerading as something completely legitimate. So when somebody resolves the npm dependency tree by just going like npm install, it basically fetches and installs that plain crypto.js 4.2.1, which, as I told you, is the malicious package in this case, the malicious dependency. Now, effectively what happens over here is once you have run and set up a rat script from the actual C2 server that you connected to, this will allow the actual hacker to grab a whole set of information off from you. So basically, from the fellas over at Windows, what it would do is it would check your documents, your desktops, your OneDrive, things like your app data directory, every single root that you could imagine on your file system. And then after all of this is done, it then goes into the 60-second loop where basically it reports the user's host name, the username, the OS version architecture, time zone, every single fucking identifier, Some of the stuff that you could probably capture from somebody's browser. And of course, when all of this is done, it then sends itself off and then gracefully sends itself into the ether, basically offs itself. Now, of course, if you were to investigate this thing right, remember, it is self-destructing, and it's something that honestly wanted itself to masquerade so that people who were interested in identifying it, like me, were going to have a harder time. But ultimately, things do get investigated. Now, hey, what happened? How many people ended up getting affected? So with 100 million people who apparently downloaded this shit, guys, you're talking about a package that exists in 80% of coding environments, cloud environments, crazy stuff, okay? So for 2 to 3 hours, one platform Wiz basically found that the payload execution happened in 3%, which for how many people download, 3%'s a lot, okay? And of course, at that point, things have just went completely tits up. So really what they were kind of targeting over here, and this is the most important aspect, is they weren't going after you, the person. They were going after the developers and a lot of their systems, because those developers hold more tokens that can be used to abuse more NPM packages, SSH keys, a lot of actual credentials for cloud services, and API keys, environment, every single important sort of token that they could have grabbed and then abused further on is what these guys were basically after, okay? It was a very coordinated attack on a group of people that were going to give these hackers the best return on investment, so to speak, right? This wasn't something where somebody wanted to hack into people's accounts and grab their, goofy little files or even hack somebody's crypto money. This was intended to spread even further. They were going to use this, and they probably are already using it as a springboard into other more nefarious hacks down the road. So a lot of people that download NPM files are probably looking at every single one of them as a possible fucking landmine, right? Everybody that maintains this shit is probably looking at all their accounts, re-signing all of their tokens and sign-ins so that this shit doesn't blow up further than it actually is. And the important thing about it too is that when it came to the person actually running the hack, a great write-up by the guys over at Step Security actually talked further about this situation and kind of built a really great write-up that went into more detail. And of course, obviously, one of the things that they saw was that obviously when it came to the person that was hacked, our friend, his legitimate post over here was replaced by this malicious post. And the email actually went to this Proton account. And of course, Proton Mail is a encrypted mail that is meant for, again, anonymity purposes. And of course, the further you go down in this story, obviously, when it came to even these hackers, they didn't make this look like it was it was like a simple job. They actually added, in some cases, a little bit of differences to the stuff that they posted so that it wouldn't immediately spark out as completely unique. It wouldn't spark out as, hey, this is just a malicious file. They actually did add some history to some of these commits so that, somebody couldn't look at it and be like, hey, fresh account is just out here to troll or, hack somebody. And again, a great diagram over here just kind of sums it up. A developer runs that npm install Axios. npm basically resolves and fetches those infected files. And once it runs a post-installation hook, which is only possible because of the minute changes they made to these files, the setup.js runs, and that basically reads into this, C2 URL. So this is the URL for the actual command server. And through this command server, they start downloading different files depending on which, Linux or which operating system they depend. So Darwin would obviously lead to Mac OS, Win32 would lead to Windows, where it would implement with the PowerShell, and Linux would go out and basically curl these Python files, where they then would actually go into the anti-forensics method, and then finally extract with all their data and run things like a remote access Trojan in the back. So I guess that's a pretty simple way of kind of like looking into it. Obviously, you can read the entire JS for anybody that wants to. And again, great write-up over there, the step security guys. Now, could this have been avoided? I'm sure it could have been avoided. It probably could have, you could have obviously had things like lock files where, if you're updating something, a lock file would have tethered a dependency like Axios to a specific version. So unless you really didn't need the updated features, you could just lock it to a version that was confirmed to be safe. And I think this mostly affects people that are probably vibe coders, but I'll get into that in a little bit because there was one other attack that I saw which was kind of hilarious to me. So this is like Shadden AI OpenClaw. This is another malicious package hit last night. And for anybody that doesn't know what the fuck OpenClaw is a personal AI assistant. And of course, the scary part about this attack is that the people who run this tool typically give it full system access. So to give you a quick understanding of what kind of stuff that happens from here, I'm going to show you what an agent really does. So here is an agent that I'm firing up called Hermes. So right here on my system, I'm going to fire it up. And inside Hermes over here, you can see that this is a full agent and it's powered by something locally running on my system. Using this new turbo quant method, I can actually run a fucking powerful context-ridden agent on one single GPU, by the way. So for instance, right over here, I can ask the agent to do, agentic tasks on my system, right? Like, can you draw an apple in ASCII art and save it to my desktop in a markdown file? And so as soon as I hit enter over here, just to show you a quick idea, what it's going to do is it's going to fire the agent. The agent is going to draw the ASCII art and then save it to my desktop. So here it's actually doing tasks, it's prepping its code, it's doing its stuff. And just to show you that my computer is working in the background, right here I can show you NVTop is basically ramping up my GPU, full load, everything is cranked up on my system. And yeah, basically the AI is doing shit. And it's actually done it already. So here it actually created apple.md. And if I open it up, well, here's what appears to be an apple. I guess that's the leaf, I guess that's the apple, and maybe that's like a stem. Looks a little broken to me. Looks a little broken to me. Can you make it look more realistic, like an actual apple? It's like, how dare you? How dare you? So again, the point of this exercise is not just show you the ASCII art ability of models, is to show you that this agent has the ability to read and write onto any part of my system. And some people can be dumb enough to give this shit pseudo permissions like, hey, update my computer and do this crazy stuff with the kernel in the background. Say yes to everything and then walk away. You don't know what the fuck your agent is executing. You don't know what the hell's going on. If there's something malicious sitting inside it, well, that can lead to some pretty serious situations down the road. Okay, this is its attempt at another apple. I don't know what kind of apples they're teaching at the Quen Academy, but it looks closer to a fucking butt plug, if anything. Okay, apple has a curved body, small leaf on top, and a stem. Yeah, man. I'm sure that's what an apple looks like. Anyways, all things aside, one actual tool that people do use is things like vibe coding. And just a quick understanding of how vibe coding works, somebody could fire up something like open code and basically give it a prompt, hey, can you write me a website that, checks the weather, yada, yada, yada. So this system will look on the internet, figure out best practices, and start writing code. Unfortunately, sometimes, depending on how complicated a project is, it may invoke and bring in dependencies like Axios that we talked about. And the thing is, unless you know what code is being written, like right now this may look like a mess to you, but again, if you know what the code is being written over here, if you know exactly what these, async functions, these ifs are doing, these if-else commands, if you know how to read your code, and you should be able to spot what kind of things are happening at the dependency level for your program. Now, vibe coders, they may not be putting that level of effort and they may not be looking at it. They may just simply prompt, walk away, come back. And those are the kinds of people that are actually going to be tripped up probably the most over this situation, right? Because again, if you don't know what your code is doing and you start prompting it like, hey, listen, this doesn't work, can you fix it for me? Which is pretty valid. But generally, if you don't know what the code is doing, you're going to be prompting things to fix itself. And if you're not actually reading stuff and you're not actually seeing what the system is pulling, that's fucking dangerous. And that's what leads to a lot of issues. And if people are vibe coding some of your most popular, most important projects, that's where you should be a little bit fearful of. Now, right now I don't have Axios installed, but you can obviously install Axios right now. Not that I particularly need it, but for people that are working in the computer side of the world, this is a pretty nasty nuclear grade level hack. Probably one of the most downloaded packages in the world, suddenly compromised. And look, even if it was compromised for like 2-3 hours, that's still 2-3 hours of hell that people are going to be paying for, and maybe even the end user, depending on how compromised services actually are. Ladies and gentlemen, if you like what you saw, please like, comment, and subscribe. Dislike it. If you dislike it, I am out.